Happy Monday, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of From the Hearts of Men radio show / podcast. I am your host, Kocysha LaShaun, founder of Be Accelerated into Purpose and overseer of Humbled by His Grace Ministries. Y'all, we are in another month of episodes. Actually, this is episode 13, and I'm so thankful for all of you who have been following us. And as I usually like to do at the beginning of every month is share just a bit about what the purpose of this show is. So for many of you, or some of you who may not know, I am an author of 7 books. My last book was titled From the Heart of God to the Hearts of Men. That book was something of a love letter from God to men, encouraging them to keep pushing, reminding them of their God identity and their purpose in life. This show now is a virtual sequel of that book that allows men to share their God-inspired transformations, life-changing decisions, and spiritual aha moments so that other men, other people, even women can glean from their stories. You know, one thing I like to tell people is when we talk about what God has done, we a lot of times refer to David, Joseph, Abraham, and Peter, and even Paul. And what I want people to know is God did not stop with them. He is still blessing our men. He still wants our men to be providers and to be the great people that he has called them to be. So this platform just allows men to share who they are and how God has been moving in their life. And let me tell you right now, the special guest that I have for today, wow. When you hear his story, and I'm looking forward to hear his story as well. And when I saw his background, I was moved to name this episode Redeemed for Greater. My special guest for today is an at-risk specialist. He was illegally sentenced to 18 and a half years in federal and state prison. And guess what? He served 4.5 years, got out for 3 years, but was then told he was let out by mistake. Man, can you even imagine that? Not only is he an at-risk specialist, he is an author. He is a coach. He is, I'm sorry, let me get to it. He is a coach, he is an author, and he has been featured on Black Enterprise, the 700 Club, and even TBN. I am happy to introduce to those of you who are tuned in to hear our very special guest, Mr. Reginald Foreman. Reginald, thank you so much for being with us on this afternoon. Please give us a little bit more of who Reginald Foreman is.
Well, Coco, thank you again for having me. It's always a great pleasure. I don't take it lightly to be able to share my story with people because you never know who's going to hear your voice and be impacted. I mean, basically, like I said, man, Reginald is a person that's a father. He's a child of God, a businessman, ministry. I'm all of that, but most of all, I'm a servant of God because God saved me from the streets. Who saved me from suicide thoughts, saved me from violence, gangs, everything to do his will. And I don't take that like he chose me at 20 years old and said, I got work for you to do.
Wow. Well, we want to get into that. We want to get into how your story began. And I know I read, I believe I read where you, growing up, you dealt with abuse and dealt with some things with your mom. And I want you to just start there and share with what your childhood was like. And, you know, as you share, we'll just, you know, go from there to where you are today. So the floor is now yours, as I've told you already, and tell all my special guests, please feel free to be as transparent and raw as you are comfortable with so that our listeners are getting true value out of what you have to share.
Well, my life starts off in the Chicago project. I grew up in gang time in the early 90s, 80s. And as they say, hurt people hurt other people. My mother was kind of distraught, was a lot of angry a lot of times. She had dabbled in drugs and she ended up in prostitution. And the time that I lived with her, standing up Chicago project, it was hard. getting chased home from school by gangs. Then don't know if I'm gonna have to go in the house and fight, not literally fight or be beaten because my mother was angry at the world. And as I said, hurt people, hurt other people. So I grew up in a lot of violence, which caused me to have a chip on my own shoulder. You know, I learned how to survive. In my lifehood, I was shipped from house to house like an orphan because my mother wasn't stable. And telling my story is not that hard because God told me to, but sometimes I've done this for a while. There'll be times that I would see my mother, I would see strange men leaving out of our house and see my mother count money. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant, but that's the way that, you know, I found out that she was surviving. I would go back and forth and see my father in Miami, Florida. You got to imagine. So my life is like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where my stepmother and my father were middle income. They made over $100,000 together, and that's back in the 90s. 4 cars, 3-bedroom house with a pool, and I'm going back to Chicago projects with bullet holes in the doors, and the hallways are pissy, and people getting killed over color. So I would go back and forth. I would spend the summer with my father, and then be moved back to Chicago, dealing with my mother. And I didn't know that my mother and my father had an agreement that after high school I would move with her. Something like just like Boys in the Hood, when you end up saying that you got to get your son. That's how it was. So growing up, like I said, growing up in Chicago projects was a hard time. I mean, before that, I was like an orphan. Auntie house, grandmother house, I was shipped around. So I never knew any stability until I got them. And there was a time I remember, I'm sorry, the time I remember that me and my mother, she was so angry because my brother was in my life. My brother's light skin. He's like Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan. So it was like my brother got really all the love in a way. He got more love. If I looked at him wrong, she was coming at me. If I touched him, she was hitting me. Something like I said, like Ricky and Doughboy and Boys in the Hood. And this is the first time I really analyzed telling my story after 50-some interviews that it was like that. But it was just like that. It was like I couldn't do right. And it was, you know, I don't know if it was the anger between her and my mother, but I felt like the distant stepchild. And this time I was my mother was trying to discipline, but she was punching me in my head with a fist. And I remember breaking out, and my uncle came in and said, you can't be hitting that boy like that. And I remember breaking out the door, just running. And my mother was throwing wrenches and tools at me. And I went to call my father, expecting him to be my savior, saying, I need to come home. Not when I come home out of the living room yet, but I need to get out of here. And my father actually told me, I need you, to calm down and try to go back and respect your mother, because I didn't understand between, visitations. I don't come to the summer. I didn't understand the agreement of how it is when you just want your father to come get you. So I had a little anger towards that. And I went back and stayed with my mother, and it was hard. I ended up moving to Miami, Florida. So you come from Chicago projects, gangs, violence, back and forth to Alabama. I was in Alabama, back and forth with my grandmother and my aunt. Now I moved to Miami, Florida. And as I said briefly, it was like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So I'm coming over there. My stepmother always tells the joke, is very proper, to where I'm coming from the hood of Chicago. I never heard a black person speak that proper like that. I thought she was white. And she's a black woman. She's light-skinned, but she's a black woman. And my father had to tell me, he said, speaking proper is not a race, it's correct English. I didn't understand that. I was like, this woman speaks like she's white. So I had got introduced to that moving with them. So I was taught how to eat with a salad fork, a soup spoon, how to tuck my shirt in. He wanted me to be a prep boy, and I'm coming from a mother that just let me live. So my father was strict. There were times I'd be on the phone with a girl. He'd come in and click into the phone back then with no cell phone. If any young people
Right.
Oh, well, they just came out the flip phones, but I ain't have one. He clicking on the phone and like, it's time for you to get off the phone. It's the most embarrassing thing. What you mean? You click it. So needs to say me and my father had a lot of bump heads. He was military and he was strict. And I didn't know, I had found out that my grandmother had pulled my father to the side before I moved with him and said, your son is a thief and a liar. And so I was surviving because it was times I took money out he wasn't my grandfather, he was my grandmother's husband, went in his pocket, because all I knew how was to survive. And so my father had it in his head that he was going to discipline me and break that out. So moving to Miami, Florida, my father wanted me to go to private school. All boys, not just private school with girls. And I begged him. I said, I don't want to go, no, all boys school. What is you talking? Oh my God. So I begged him. And he let me go to public school. The second day of school, what I went through in Chicago, bullied. A dude looked like he should have been in college, ninth grade, named Mike Bowler. I don't used to say people's name, but I never forget it. He grabbed me in the chokehold in the bathroom with 4 other guys, and he was going in my pocket taking my money. And this dude already looked like a high school, college linebacker. And I remember getting so much tears in my eyes, because usually when I see red, that one of the dudes was like, leave the little punk alone, give him his money. So they gave him my money. Second day of school, I went to the house, and I had found my father's brass knuckles. And I was going to hurt him. So as I'm going out the door, my father saw me leave, and he stopped me, because he was like, what's going on? I guess my rush to go to the school bus, I ain't never like that. I ain't had no problem trying to get to the school. So I had my book bag over my shoulder, and I was squeezing my strap like this with tension. And my father, I didn't know he studied body language. It's a book. He was studying stuff. He said, what's wrong with you? I said, no, I'm just trying to get to school. He said, let me see what's in your bag. Went in my bag and pulled out the brass knuckles. And that's when he gave me the talk. He said, listen, I prefer for you to always try to talk your way out of it. But he said, I never want to see you taking a weapon. I want you to use deep. And he probably saved my life earlier than it needed to be a prison and stuff. Because if I would have caught that guy with them brass knuckles, so much tension and being bullied and anger would have came out of it. So he stopped me from that. So as time goes on, I'm in Miami, Florida, and living, like I said, I'm living a different life. And I start my father and stepmother never really had arguments and stuff, but I started noticing that it was like on Thursdays and stuff that he would be not coming home till late. One time I seen her on the couch crying, and she actually laid her head on my shoulder, and I didn't know what was going on. So speed it up, my stepmother and my father ended up getting a divorce. I don't know why, I thought it was a great house. I was in a house where we didn't go to church. My father was self-righteous. Like I started first time going to church because I was a girl. I was chasing this girl, went to church. And I remember my father sitting at the table, at the edge of the table, reading his magazine, his newspaper. He looked at me, he said, oh, you going where? You going to church? And he just closed it. He said, all right, good for you. So my father felt like if he wasn't, selling drugs or doing drugs at that time, hint that he was okay. I started sneaking in my dad's truck, looking for money, because he used to keep money laid around in the truck. And I found a dollar bill rolled up in the ashtray, real thin. I went to open it up, there was white stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what cocaine was back then. But because of who my father was, I really put it to the back of my mind, because my father was one that wasn't drinking. He was like the Colin Powell. He was the Mr. Education. They called him Mr. Dictionary in high school. He was the one that made it to us, like I said, a nice income job and over $50,000 back in the 90s, like I said. So I never had no chance, but my father found out he was doing drugs. So my stepmother and my father ended up getting a divorce. My stepmother went her way, and then my father, I started getting more and more into the streets because my father had a strict hand on me. I started hanging with the wrong crowd, like I said. I started hanging with the wrong crowd after that time I got bullied, because I knew, I had to get in where I fit in. And I said, if a person look at me wrong, I'm swinging on them. So I learned to be a predator and a violent person myself. That's all I grew up around. Mm-hmm. But finally, when I get a chance to move into a middle-income house where I can make it, at 14, 15, if you remember, you start smelling yourself. That's the age where you think you know everything. So that's when my father got me and thought he was going to break it out of me. I'm sneaking out the house trying to date girls, just going through what teenagers do. My father and them ended up getting, like I said, a divorce. My father, I started noticing my father was hanging around with, because he had best friends or friends that were Cuban and Colombian, and they were selling drugs. One of them owned a strip club. They were doing stuff, and that's why you learn, if you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. My father of FPNL, just like in St. Louis, Anheuser-Busch, they had a nationwide layoff. And my father he'd been there for 13 years. And in the 8-year spans, he had not missed one day. So they didn't fire him. They offered him a payout, a lower compensation to stay. And he said, no, he took the payout. So my father takes the payout. He leaves his job. Things are going down. I'm hanging with the wrong crowd. And my father, the DEA came looking for him. So my father went from this clean-cut guy with suits on, suspenders, riding around with 2 white women on the side of him in a limo as a drug dealer and a pimp.
Wow.
I can't make it up. My life story is definitely a movie. We're working on it. But so I'm calling, telling relatives what happened to my father, and they think I'm lying. You always been lying. Because how you gonna say your father, who was the corporate man that made it, is a pimp now? This is literally what happened, because see, my father was in the streets like me. He changed when he went to the army. He didn't have a spiritual recognition with God. So when you go through hard times, he fell back on who he was. And it got worse. So my father's in a selling drugs. I'm literally riding around a limo with white women. He has a dope spot. And I started, like I said, getting in trouble, getting in more trouble. What happened was one of the times, it was a strip club. My father had shook hands with the owner. I don't know if their contract told me they shook hands. So I was able to work in the kitchen area of the strip club, about 18, 19 years old.
Okay.
Women coming in the back, butt naked. It's a strip club. And I'm living it up like, oh my God, I'm back there. I couldn't go to the other side because there was a liquor law and I was a minor. So I'm running the kitchen part because my father did that. I'm getting to a point because there was a spot where he had a dope spot. We call it a trap where he was selling drugs. And my best friend, who was a little bigger than me, he let him come over there and be his muscle, but he wouldn't let me come over there. So my father did keep me away from the drugs. I wanted to be over there where the action was, and he put me in the strip club. So I'm over there as the cook in the strip club, and I'm on my way to work one day. My father calls me, he beat me because his beat was back then. I called him on the payphone. He said, don't come in. They killed. It was a little short, older Cuban guy. He used to wear a lot of jewelry. He had on a sweatpants outfit. And I remember him telling my dad, I like the way your son looked because I used to keep a mean scowl on my face, coming from being bullied and learning how to survive.
Right.
So as he was going to one of the cafes, because it's in like a Spanish town with two of the strippers, he was going to the cafe. Somebody ran him over with a truck. They backed over him with the truck and got out and took time and shot him 9 times. So in our world, what you call it, that was a hit. That was no accident. They didn't take none of his jewelry. They didn't even take the money out of his pocket. And I was the first time I was that close to something. I was like, wow, they killed the old because of the old man. But they killed him like that. So my father, that went away. And then my father started disappearing. He was just lightly, I wouldn't see him no more. Until, like I said, one day the DEA came knocking on the door. I used to have a Doberman and a Rottweiler in the backyard, and they got the gate open. I was like, what y'all was gonna do, shoot my dog? And so they were telling me, we just trying to help your father wherever he is. Just let us know. They was trying to convince me. By that time, I'm like, how are you trying to help him? So I didn't know that my father was, I guess he got lost. I don't know. I didn't see him for years though. My father just disappeared.
Wow.
So now I was left the house. I'm gonna tell you this, what I always tell people, God always makes a way out of your situation. At 16 years old, I was offered to move to St. Louis with my aunt now. But when I say they Kojic, skirt down their ankles, no makeup, Holy Ghost church, I was like, ain't nowhere in the world I'm moving up here with them. I ain't gonna be able to date no women. I ain't gonna be able to play no rap music. I said no. So, but I had a chance. I had a way to escape. Said no, I'm gonna stand on my own 2 feet. That was at 17 or 16. They offered me to come up there. I'm 19 now. And I'm starting to do robberies because I didn't want to sell. I didn't want to sell drugs for 2 reasons. My mother was strung out on drugs, and I didn't want to be. For me, when you on the corner selling drugs, jump out. The police undercover get you. I said I ain't going to jail, so I'd rather have a pistol and do what I do. So I ended up doing robberies. Got a couple of bloopers. One of the I thought I was going to be a. Let me tell you how God will be speaking to you and telling you this ain't what you're supposed to be doing. And I just give y'all 2 of them, but one of them. We had a guy tell, I don't know if I can say it on this show, but I keep it. One of the guys had a house, and they told it was a dope house where they was keeping the drugs. We had an inside guy. So we come there to the house, and it was a mailbox was full of mail, like ain't nobody living there. So we got an inside man telling us there's drugs in the house. So we in the backyard, like the army windows open out, like they pop out. So we snatched them.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
You were in the backyard. You froze up just a little bit. So you said you were in the backyard.
Yeah, we're in the backyard. We're crawling on the back, and we get to the window where it opens up the bars, the metal plate opens up. We stick our hands in and snatch it out the wall. That's how serious we were, to the window. So we get in the window, and all of us is a ramsack in the house looking for the drugs. When you see it, one of the guys, all we heard him say, it was me and some Spanish guys. We call them Chicos in Miami. So we hear him in the back, and we hear him knocking on the door. It was a door. We kicked the door in. It was a 6-foot safe in there. We like, the drugs gotta be in here. So it was like, but how are we gonna get the safe? I walked past them and started shaking the safe with all my energy and pushed the safe out of the ground, the screws and everything. When they say you either trying to protect them or you are desperate, you can get strong and crazy.
Right.
They looked at me like, this Negro. So the safe fell down. So one of the guys stepped up and said, hey, my brother got a blowtorch. We could take it to his house. So you talking about we pulled off with the safe on the back of a truck out of the house. Like I said, it is a movie. We get to the garage and his brother, he got his brother torch, and we in the bottom of the safe trying to open the safe up. we was able to bend down, and all you saw was white, like a white stuff. So before we pulled it out the bag, we started slapping hands because a lot of us were struggling. Like, well, we got it. We already know we're gonna flip these keys, everything. We would celebrate. Reached down in the safe. It was a white bag, grocery bag. Let's say it was a 6-inch. It was a 6-inch toy in the bag wrapped up.
Okay.
Put it like that. So either the guy knew we was coming, or he was a freak, or it was a subliminal message what that meant to us. It was wrapped up in the bag. And we're like, why would this be in the safe? So now we're like, oh my God, this man has set us up. That was one of my bloopers. The next time,
wow.
Yeah, the message it was wrapped up in a bag in the safe to give us a message. We don't know what it was. But wasn't no drugs in that house.
Right.
Okay, so the next time I'll tell you, when I was getting in crime, went to rob this Eckerd's. It was a grocery store. I'm over the statute of liberty. I did my time. But we went to rob this store, and one of the guys that was with me, he had a gun. He had a Tech 9 with a long clip. And he jumps out, because this has led to where I'm showing how I was tired of letting people do what we weren't making. He jumps out. It was 7 a.m. The woman was doing a drop for the grocery store. Somebody told her she's going to do the drop at this time. All you got to do is rob. Mm-hmm. Big woman, big heavy-set white woman. So he jumps out the car. I'm in the backseat. They're wrestling and tussling in broad daylight. I'm thinking, why don't you just hit her and knock her down? She leans over the railing with all her weight. He snatches half, jumps in the car, and pulls off. We get back to my house, I think, where we got back to. He had the part with the receipt. She had the money. I said, come on. This got to be the craziest stuff I've been going through. I said, you was tussling with her instead of knocking her out, and we got the receipts for the drop, and she got the money. That happened. So leads up to the bank. I remember the guy I got introduced to after that was one of my friends that went to high school. He said his older brother does big rock. There's different levels, like big from drug dealers. Mm-hmm. They done robbed for $400,000. They was getting money. So he introduced him to me because he knew I was a hungry, wild dude. He introduced him to me, and I had a friend that worked at a bank. So I came up with the idea. Now, the bank is on the hill. It was a drive-through teller is right down the hill. It opens at 8 a.m., whatever time. The bank opens at 9. Mm-hmm. You can only go through the drive-through teller. If you want to go inside the bank, it's separate. Sure, each one of y'all cities, y'all seen that before. Mm-hmm. So I remember laying on the couch, Joe, and it was a real rainy, stormy day, and I'm looking at the ceiling fan. This is before, the power this is before the power went out of my house. I barely had food in the house. I was doing bad. I was calling relatives for help. They didn't want to help me. Nobody had no money. It was like I was forced this way. But again, I could have left, and I didn't want thinking about that. And I remember just saying to God, man, I remember saying it out loud. I need your help. I need this to work out. So we go in. We had a stolen car. We go to rob the bank. The drive-through teller. The first time we sit in the car, and the people, what they do is walk up from the parking lot, and they go in. So we in the parking lot. What they walk up and they go in the back. You got to wait till they open the door because it's a big door, and it closes real hard. They walk up, go to the door. I go to run and jump out the car because I said, I'm going to do this. We're going to make it. And the door in the car was locked. So I couldn't time it. It makes it. So we sitting around trying to get, I said, who locked the door? Like blue. We arguing about who locked the door. Next day, we pull up the same way. They go in the bank. I'm running to try to time it. And my hand slipped off the door now, and the door closed. So I'm outside, crouched down behind the door in broad daylight and missed the time to grab the doorknob. My hand slipped off the doorknob of the bank door. Run back to the car, we pull off. I'm like, this got to be the craziest thing in the world. And that's when I had that day I prayed. And that's when I learned the enemy, the devil, can answer prayers or make things seem like God, just like God can. Because the last day was about to give up. It rained, everything went right. And I seen the guy I was doing the crime with, he was praying to God. I just was soft. I'm like, what you praying to God for? That we robbed the bank? He said, I'm praying that we don't get killed or go to jail. Like, all right. So Jamaican guy. So we go. I jump out. This time we parked the car right next to the door because I visualized, I didn't know that cars was parked there. They let you sit there until the light turned green and say, pull up. So it was right next door. I was like, yo, we can park right at the teller. Parked right there. They jumped out. I forced them in with the gun, shot the gun in the ceiling, gave me more time. And all I remember was the lady on the floor screaming and hollering. And I was feeling bad because my heart would never know. I would never know. I had guys that I hung with that shot at people for fun, but I wasn't that guy. I always felt like, you ain't supposed to be here. but I was somebody that was bullied and had to learn how to fit where I was. I became that violent person. But I just remember her screaming and crying. I'm like, I'm not gonna shoot you. And the man, the white guy, the owner was trying to stall me. I said, man, don't get killed over this money. I'm saying everything I saw on TV. Saying what I need to say. End up getting away, drove off, got to the house, we had $11,000. Because what happened was supposed to have been more, but he was stalling, telling us, man, I only got the morning shift money. The second shift is another key for the people that work here. So it was been over 100-some thousand, end up with 22,000. We got 11 people. So we there, like I said, we celebrating. He said, listen, put everything you had on, because I took the woman's purse. I said, I'm taking everything in here. So I guess it was to that desperate point. I want the wallet, I want your purse, everything in the safe. She had a cell phone. That's when the flip phones had just came out. She had a cell phone. And the guy that I was with, experienced, told me, Reggie, we're going to burn everything. I'm like, nah, yeah, I'm going to do it. I kept the lady's cell phone. So I got the lady's cell phone. I'm riding around still in this, because what happened was the stolen car we had, we didn't have to break into it. Somebody was going to the grocery store. I mean, in their house, taking their groceries out, left their keys in, and one of our guys jumped in the car and drove off. So I'm still driving around in the lady's stolen car with a cell phone from the bank, young and dumb. I'm riding around with it, got like 900 from the money, 1,000 in my pocket. I picked up my little friend, he was about 16 years old, I was 19. I picked him up and I just shook his hand. I said, boy, I did it. I did it, I got the money. He was happy for me because everybody knew I was struggling. So when I was sitting in the car, he was like, where you get this car from? I said, man, you know it's from the rock. He said, you crazy. So he saw the cell phone. He said, what's up with that cell phone? I said, that was from the lady first. He said, you know they can trace that phone to the bank robbery. I was like, man, who did this? Man, I did this. I know what I'm doing. This is a 16-year-old warning to me that they can trace the phone. I ain't listen. So later on that night, I'm calling my god brother. No, first I called my ex-girlfriend because I wanted to gloat and boast that I got money now. And I called her. She said something. I didn't know I was activating the phone.
Right.
Then I called my god brother. I was going to get him. We was going to go to Chicago and flip, to the drug game with somebody up there. I ain't going to say what it was, but we was going to go up there. As I'm driving at the gas station, I got out to get gas. I'm on the phone, the stolen cell phone, talking to my god brother, my best friend. And as I'm there, a police car drives by slow, looking at me hard. And I said, hey, look, man. I said 5-0, what we said back then, looking at me. I said, man, I'm going to have to turn around. So as I ease in and got in the car and pull off, I'm talking about 15 cars came out of nowhere. They was tracing me from the cell phone since I turned it on. All the cars came, they snatched me out the car. They were saying where the phone at more than anything. Slammed me on the ground for nothing. I was like, man, what it did? They traced me to the cell phone. I get to the prison, or the jail. And where you get the phone from? I had lied at first. I said I bought it from a guy. Back then they had what we call throwaways. People stealing phones and you can buy them like that. I was like, man, I bought this from the guy around off the corner. I don't know where this phone came from. They started putting that fear of God in you about your time, what's going to happen to you. And they left me in the room for about an hour. All that stuff was flooding in my head. Like, oh, I can't do this. I ended up confessing. They told me, I told them where I got the phone from. You was with, I said, no, I wasn't nobody else with me. Inside my house was a box full of the money. And I had wrote down, because I got a habit of writing and taking notes. I wrote down my name and a guy named Brian on the paper. And I had it split up. So they said, we knew it was another guy. I said, I didn't snitch though. I was like, nah, he went with me. For one thing, the code, we say the streets, but also this dude helped me. Had no reason I got caught. Anyway, they had that, and they gave me the time. I got sentenced. I went to federal prison because it was a federal bank robbery. I never was supposed to touch state prison. But when I got to the federal prison, I got to tell this part. I ended up going to trial. But I had wrote the judge I wrote the judge before time because I had gotten the Bible and everything. I remember my grandma saying, they say people, you find God, you go to prison, but I obeyed God. There was a time that I was sitting on the table, me and my homeboy was at another friend's house. And the Bible was on the table, and he used to come to school in 11th grade with leather pants on, driving Acuras and Hondas. I knew he was doing something. He used to try to get me to sell drugs. I'm like, my daddy don't play that. I don't want to sell no drugs. And I remember the Bible was open. It said, if you build your house on sin, it shall surely perish apart. But it was talking about the temple in the Bible. I thought it was because this is the time my dad was gone. He finally came to me, and I was thinking about selling the drugs. We was going to do it out the house. And when I read that, I was like, man, I can't sell no drugs. He was like, do you read that? He closed the Bible. I'm like, man, don't worry about that. But it never ended up happening. But I'm sharing that to say many times God was talking to me on the street. When I had one of the robberies I did at a grocery store, it was initiation. I was working at this grocery store. Everybody from all parts of Miami, we got together and said we're gonna do a robbery. Now everybody trying to see who stick their chest out. There was a man walking home from the store. We was casing looking for people. We went to the white people neighborhood. We was gonna jump out. We jumped out. I hit the man because I was known to have a knockout punch. He falls down. Everybody jumping out the car, snatched his wallet, beating him. I took the man groceries and took my part of the money. So I'm at my house and it's dark. And I'm drinking the man orange juice. All I heard clear as day. Never had really heard God's voice. You know that was wrong. So I'm turning around looking like, realize that's all I heard. You know that was wrong. And so I turned around and looked. So that's what I'm saying. There was many times when I got to prison, I just obeyed it. I ain't just fine. He had been telling me and calling me. So I'm in prison. I write the judge about to go to trial. So I go to trial because I had, usually when you get a public defender, like we froze up.
I can still hear you and see you.
You still there, Coco?
I'm here.
Okay, yeah, froze. I saw you froze. I don't know who froze.
Oh, okay.
Usually when you get a public defender, they'll tell you, man, they ain't gonna try to work for you. They ain't gonna do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So public defender looked at me. Can you still hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, it's just freezing up in front of me. I see you pausing. So I get this public defender. I end up getting a good guy. He looked at me, heard my story. He said, you just a young guy that effed up. That's how he said. He said, I want to help you. So he looked at everything. So at the time that I started going down my demise, my father was getting in trouble, as I was telling you. So when I went to trial, my public defender was trying to make me like I was just a young guy that didn't need no trouble. I didn't know I had on my daddy's jacket. I had on his pants when I robbed the bank. He called my neighbor, which was one side was a white woman, the other side was a Spanish guy. And they was like, oh, we seen Reggie play with our kids because I was yes, ma'am, and no, sir in front of people. They didn't know I was doing crimes, doing stuff behind us because I was raised Southern too, how to be, be mannerable. And so it looked good for me. And but I felt the pain, like, because I already had gotten the Bible, was trusting God. I'm like, he's lying, making it like my dad did it. And I was taking up on him. But evidently it worked because I had a hung jury. They couldn't find me guilty. Mm. All they had was a woman said, so they had this woman from the bank that I told you that was screaming, pick me out on a lineup. But I had a scarf right here, a bandana, and a baseball cap. How can you see me? Can't see nothing but my eyes. And she said she picked me out from my eyes, which I believe, they took the picture and pointed me out. So I got the hung jury. Now, in the midst of a hung jury, what they do is, if you know about anything, they tell you to go back a couple of days and deliver for another trial, and you get a retrial. Before that, what the public defender did was give this paper, Allen charge, or something that said that we want him to deliberate right now, the jury to go back right now. Mm-hmm. Now, remember, I had wrote this got to be the crazy stuff. I wrote a letter to the judge. The judge already know I'm guilty because I had asked for leniency before I was going to go to trial. My public defender taught me going to trial. So he reads it, he said, look, I want y'all to go back right now and deliberate again. He said, but listen, jury, let me tell you a story. I'm looking at the judge, he said, last week, I went to the movie. And in the movies, it had all kind of twists and turns and what if and whatnot. He said, this is not a movie. You have to look directly at the evidence. So I'm looking at him. But from there, I looked at my lawyer and said, don't you see what he doing? He coercing the jury. 5 minutes later, they found me guilty after the judge gave his speech. Mm-hmm. So now I get sentenced 9.5 years, then lost trial. I'm in there. And like I said, the state thing popped up. The state charged me. I got legally sentenced. The state said,
you're going in and out of it.
Rob the people. I see me rob the people outside. Why would I run in the bank after that? Because it happened at one time. I was supposed to get that. So I ended up with 9 years for the robbing people outside because that never happened. So what happened was the state said, "Well, we're going to do is
repeat that again. You froze up just a little bit. So I know you got 9 years for Fed.
Oh, we freezing up. I can hear you now. Come on now. All right.
Okay, so I heard you said you got 9 years for Fed, and then you got some
No, I got
for.
9.5 years. And so what they charged me for robbing the people personal stuff. But
Okay.
that if I would have literally robbed them outside the bank, that would have been a separate charge. But that never happened. They were inside the bank at work. So I never was supposed to get 9 years in state prison. So I got 9.5 years in federal. That's what it carried for armed bank robbery because I had a gun. And that's supposed to have been it. It'd have been one episode. I did take their personal stuff, but they was at work. It should have been one episode of 9.5 years. So I ended up getting 9 in state, 9.5 in the federal. But the state said what we'll do is run our time concurrent with the federal. So what that means is while I'm in federal prison, each calendar day is falling off the state and the federal prison. It's just falling off. So but what happens now I done got my time ran concurrent. I'm getting off the state bus. I'm getting from the state jail court to go to the federal prison. Everybody's going to the federal bus, but they stopped me. They said, Mr. Foreman, you got to go back to state prison. You got to do your state first, then you're fed. I'm like, that's 18 and a half years. So right before my eyes, they didn't accept the sentence. I ended up getting 18 and a half years for my first charge getting ever in my life.
Wow.
Well,
Before we, if I may, before we get into that, so you've given us a lot so far, and for time's sake, I want to make sure we get into where your life changed in prison. Because one of the things you shared, so we know you grew up seeing your mom with the different men coming in and out, and you said you were back and forth in orphans or as an orphan or from moving from family to family. And one question I did want to ask, though, kind of going back a little bit, you said that your dad was in Miami and your mom here is in Chicago. Did your dad know the lifestyle that you were living in Chicago? Did he have any idea what your mom was going through, what you were going through?
I think he had an idea because what I used to see my dad do, I think one day when he came to get me, my mom wasn't there. And I remember him going through the ashtrays, checking for stuff. Like looking around to see if it was, he found a weed joint in there and everything. So I don't know to what extent, because at that moment, my mom wasn't heavy on drugs at that moment. I didn't start the heavy prostitution until towards the end. It had got worse later on.
Okay, because I was just wondering, like, why if it was such that big of a difference between households, did your dad know? And instead of the arrangement, the arrangement was for you to come when you turned a certain age, but at the same time, did he know that about your mom? You also mentioned you did not grow up in church.
No. Well,
So
my grandmother took me to church, but when I was with her, but it wasn't in my dad's house or my mother's house. So when I would go to Alabama and stay there, because I did go to but like I said, I used to tell people when I come home from church, my grandmother would smoke a long bits in the hedge and would cut you with a knife if you messed with her. So I knew church, but it wasn't instilled with me for people around.
Gotcha. So let's get to where you get sentenced, you're in prison. So tell me about what you are feeling now, because I worked in the prison facility, all males, for 3.5 years. So not that long, but long enough to know that when you're in prison, so it's like now you've gotten to this place, you don't have anything, you're away from family. Tell me what's going through your mind. You said that they now have told you it's not just 9 years, and I can see where it may be going out a bit. So they tell you it's not just 9.5 years, they want you to now do 18.5 years. What went through your mind when you heard that number? Because how old are you at this point? What, 19, 20?
I just had turned 20.
Okay.
20. Mm-hmm. Well, the biggest thing was when I lost Charlie, came after that time, I remember being in cell cursing God out. That's when I had I was cursing God. I was angry, trying to, hear my grandmother say, pray. And I was yelling at God at the top of my lungs, like, where the F were you when my mother was beaten? Where were you when I was running home, being chased home by these, I use NIGG. Where were you? Where were you when I was hungry? And I remember just going crazy in the cell, and I fell out and everything. I remember God sending a message to me saying, I have a purpose for it all. So that's when God gave me that piece that he has a purpose for. Thus my speaking message and everything. I believe there's purpose in your pain. So I help people from that. But that wasn't what happened. My mind was I was ready to take my life. I was suicidal. And that's when I remember going out to God. I was like, what am I living for? And I wasn't getting visits or nothing. I was really in prison on my own. You know, I didn't have no family come to see me or nothing until, you know, like I said, when they let me out and came back, when they came back and got me. Which that part we got to cover. Yeah.
Right. So tell us about that. So you are in federal prison. You do 4.5 years. They say you can get out. So first of all, what's that feeling like? So you were what, 20? So you like what, about 24, 25 now? You get out.
Yeah, so
How
what
was
happened?
that feeling?
Well, what happened was, which I gotta say this part. I sometimes I went into the other stories. I'm used to cutting in time, but I said too much, giving y'all the little meat. I gave y'all the whole movie. But what happened was, I gotta say this part. When I had got to, I finally won my appeal, and I went back into the state county jail where you can, you know, for why they didn't run the time concurrent. I had did 4 years, and I finally got back in the county jail. While I was in there, I got a letter from the federal prison saying your case is mute, your case is closed. You exasperate all your remedies. So I remember running to the cell, yelling at my friend like, yo, they just closed my case. The feds say I can't get out. I don't know what I'm gonna do. This man, I'm looking through a brick wall. You got the bars because we're talking through the wall. He started laughing and praising God. And I'm like, what you laughing and praising God for? He said, now, he got real quiet. This is scriptural things. He said, now you're gonna see the hands of God. Now you're gonna see his power because you don't have no way else out.
Right.
So now I'm reading the Bible, the walls of Jericho, the part of the rest, everything is real. Now I said, this ain't no movie no more. I gotta believe. So I'm trying to believe. I go in there and the judge say, the state prison said, Mr. Foreman, we did agree to run out time concurrent in 1997, but somehow they didn't agree. So what we're gonna do is overturn your charge for the crime and just charge you for the gun. So the gun carried 3 years. They took the 9 years away. Now I already did 4 years, so now I'm re-sentenced to 3 years. That means I'm a year over my new sentence. I could have walked straight on the jail. They said, but we can't let you go because the federal prison has a hold on you, a detainer. They come to pick you up. So I get back in the jail. I'm like, now I'm excited because I done seen some light. Like something happened. They sent me, and what happened was on a Monday they pick you up to go to state prison. To go to federal prison. I'm trying to figure out why they sent me to state prison. There's a saying, why you trying to figure it out? God has already worked it out. So they sent me to a state prison. I'm in there. I'm writing a lawyer. I'm writing a judge. I even wrote the prosecutor. Like 4 months go by, I left it alone. I'm sitting in this classroom where they teach you how to open a bank account when you get out. Federal prison.
You're in and out a little bit.
As I'm in there, we need you down at R&D. As I walk to the door, I used to mentor this I wasn't a mentor, I call, but that's what I do now. But that was his big brother, Haitian dude, young kid. He was wild. None of the older guys would deal with him. But I always tell people that youth need discipline, but they need love. So I was like his homie. He yelled, hey, boy, today is your day. Things happen when it rains. It was pouring down rain outside. I was like, dang. I said, what's that, some voodoo or something? Things happen when it rains. So I walked down a lady typing on.
You're breaking
I'm sitting
up.
there nervous. She said, Mr. Foreman, you have immediate release. I'm like, okay, because I know I ain't even supposed to be in state. I'm supposed to be in federal prison. She said, Mr. Foreman, you have immediate release. I'm like, all right. So now my stomach bubbling and asking. Just 4 months ago, there was a hold on me. I said, detain on me in the computer? She said, no. I said, there's no hold on my name in the computer? She said, no. I said, I'm going to shut up and ride this out. So I get up. They give me the change of clothes that you get out of prison. They give me $100. Change of clothes, got $100. I walked to the police car with the officer. She put me in the front seat, not the back seat. I said, yo, this is like real, because what they say is the federal prison lets you get out, get across the street and come and say, look, you owe us some time. So I get out. She take me to the Greyhound bus. She said, Mr. Foreman, have a nice life. I don't want to see you again. The Greyhound bus drove off. I'm like, oh my God, I just beat the feds. They never came and got me. So I get out of Miami. I knew that I tell people 3 things I had to learn. When you get out of prison or you get out of a bad breakup of relationship or drugs, the accountability live out here, I ain't no more. So you need accountability when you come out of something.
Okay, so yeah, I want to make sure we get the first one because you froze up just a little bit. So you said 3 things. So you said the first one is accountability.
Okay, say it again.
You mentioned when you get out of prison, for anyone that gets out of prison or a bad relationship.
Oh, if you've been in a bad relationship?
The number one
And you
is
know how you
accountability.
run. Yeah, you need accountability. If you've been on
Mhm.
drugs, because people need somebody to hold you strong. I
Mhm.
knew that I needed to get around people that was gonna help me stay out of prison. So what happened? I called that Kojic aunt, them church people in St. Louis, and I was like, look, I gotta leave my
Wow. Okay.
yeah. So I ended up moving to St. Louis. I was in the church, I was dating the pastor's daughter. I was about to be the deacon. I was working at Labor Ready where they pay you $6-7 an hour for a crazy job. I ain't thinking about prison. My pastor's daughter started having dreams. I went back to prison. And her mother is a prophetess that's scary.
Mhm.
She can tell you the color, everything. But her daughter started having dreams. I'm like, but I ain't thinking about crime. You know, lost your mind. She had 4 dreams. I went back to prison. One of them was I was in boot camp, which I found out prison was a spiritual boot camp. So I'm out 30 months, 4 days after Valentine's Day, 2014, my 30 months. And 6 a.m. if you ever heard a U.S. Marshal serving warrant, it'll wake you up out of coma. I jump up, I go down there, and the door was open. My cousin opened the door. The U.S. Marshal was like, Mr. Foreman, we have a warrant for your arrest. They put me in handcuffs and took me to the car. I'm like, as they driving off, the officer turns around and says, Mr. Foreman, you was let out of prison erroneously by mistake. I said, oh my God, everything going through me. And I wasn't even mad at the government. I was mad at God. I said, God, is you an Indian giver? I done left the city I was getting in trouble. I'm about to be the deacon in the church, dating the pastor's daughter. I'm working crazy job. And you telling me I'm going back in there? I'd rather have what we call judge the jury on the street. Let me out. Let me go meet my maker before I go back into prison. So after 3 years, I'm going back to prison. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed. I was suicidal, in tears, just like, man, ain't no need to living. And this guy came to me. He was another jailhouse lawyer. He was anointed, though. That's why I tell people, you got to learn to accept the help that God sends. It
Mhm.
might not be in the package that you think, but God will
Right.
send you help.
Right. Right.
So that man walked up to me. He just started telling me, I see this God has spoken to me about you, got this call, and I remember saying, but it was speaking life into me. I had a chance to say, Negro, I want to hear nothing else about God. That's what I was feeling. But I just said, all right, man, whatever you say, man. I started occupying myself, building myself up. I got like 30-some certificates. I usually have it with me, but 30-some certificates where I tell people, while you're praying and you're waiting on God, how are you showing him that you're being prepared for the blessing you're asking for? How are
Mhm.
you showing him you're ready?
Mhm.
So I was voted prisoner of the month, most likely to succeed when you get out of prison. They do have awards for that.
I
I
didn't
mean,
know
I was getting
about
out,
that.
yeah, federal prison. I was getting that. So the guy started working on my case. And what happened was he won the appeal because they didn't want to give me the time I did in federal prison. I mean, state
Right.
prison.
Right.
They said the time didn't run concurrent. We're not going to give it to you. I had to fight the appeal. So I ended up doing 4.5 years, 3 years on the street, and I did 4 more years. So I did 8.5 years altogether.
Wow. So the second time you in, you talk about how you went through this whole process again. Like, wow, God, why am I here? What did you learn through that process to prepare you for when you got out again? What did you learn that second time in that process?
You know, that's the hardest part. I got stronger in God. I know
Mhm.
that for sure in my calling. But I was out because what I learned is a lot of people out on the streets, so unless you just have a ministry calling and that's what you dedicated to, life goes on and you don't be as deep in the word like that. So in prison, I had nothing to do but sit in that word. And that's when God started prophetically telling me I had this big calling on my life, not just, a labor. I had stuff to do. And I was like, but God, but why did I can't say, to tell you the truth, why I had to go back. All I know is that this second go around, me and God got so much closer and my purpose was getting more defined with that second time, with closer to God.
Wow, wow. And I've heard people say too that sometimes um, prison was the best thing to happen to them because it saved them
See,
from
I
this.
ain't been able to say that though,
I've
Coco.
heard.
When people be like, Reggie, I said, I'm not gonna tell you I'll do it again. But I hear people say that, but I guess because I knew inside of me I didn't have a drug problem, I wasn't a reoccurring
Offender.
crime person.
Mhm.
Once I got them 6 months, that was enough. I was like, I ain't doing no more crime. The first time at 20. So robbing the bank was big, and the way he did it was wrong, but I never felt like, man, I need to go in there. You could have sent me to boot camp, what they do, or jail, and I would have been done. In my mind, God knows best, but I've never been able one of them people like people say, man, I need to go to prison. I do it all over again. Still ain't said that yet.
Wow, wow. So you get out You've done 8.5 years. God has been with you. Obviously, his hand is obviously on you. Can you hear me okay still? Um, his hand is on you, so you're out, everything. Okay, can you hear me now? Y'all
Yeah.
forgive us. Y'all know how technology can be, but we still pushing through here. So hopefully y'all have heard most of his story. And now we're just kind of wrapping it up a bit and getting to the nuts and bolts of this. So you are now out. So how does your life switch to what you are doing now?
Well, when I got out, my whole focus, because they told me that the ex-offenders can go to college. And I can get it, as long as I didn't have a drug charge, they can give me a grant. So I said
Mhm.
I was gonna go to school. Nobody, my dad went to college. I was a black sheep. I went to school. It was a ex-offender that did 10 years for selling drugs. So I knew with a federal record I could become a chef. But I found out while I was in a culinary school that I like cooking, but I don't love
Okay. You're frozen.
it. Perfectly spoke to me. Uh-oh, this is, woo.
I know, but we almost there. I'm trying to get
Okay,
these
so
last 3 points out of you before it
yeah,
starts
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
go too
yeah. So
bad.
my stepmother spoke to me at the age of 14 and said, "You need to do something with T-shirts and cards." I didn't know that was spoken in my spirit at 14 years old. So now I was like, "What do I have a passion for?" I love to write. I love to draw. My mother would put me on punishment when I was younger, and I would go in there and write and draw. She said, I can't even put you on punishment," because I'll be in there drawing and writing. So
Mhm.
now I'm like, I left culinary arts and I switched my major over to graphic design. I knew I had to do something with my art gift. Now, what happens when you're on the right road, hard things begin to happen. I started bumping heads with my aunt. She was old school. You need to work these jobs. And I said, man, I need to quit school. I want to get 2 jobs to get out of her house. So I left school and I was working at this t-shirt shop, making t-shirts.
Mhm.
So my gift of writing became an idea. I said, let me tell you, when I tell people God will speak to you through anything, I was watching T-Pain the rap on BET Hip Hop Awards.
Mhm.
And he said, he had this cup. He said, I want to thank all my haters for this award. And that light bulb went off. God bless my haters because they know not what they do. My first 2 shirts, one was God made me work and break me, because what I went through. And the second was God bless my haters. I was riding around in an old red Fred Sanford pickup truck I got from a friend. One had beat cancer. He said, I need that good work and break me. One just came out of divorce. I need that shirt. Another one was like, I can't stand this girl on my job. I need that God bless my haters. I say, you do know it say God bless my haters. But whatever you want to buy it for, hey. So
Right.
I knew I had something. I was putting dope sayings on t-shirts, graphic design t-shirts. Ended up getting married. That's a whole nother segment. I got divorced. But anyway, ended up getting married. And it got hard for a while. I didn't know I was hustling. I didn't know how to grow a business. And I had quit for a whole year. And I was at this church. This lady behind me was in praise and worship. And she was yelling like it was a rock concert. And it was getting, I was like, it ain't that much worship in the world. She got quiet the same way the dude in the prison. She tapped me on the shoulder. She said, are you trying to start a business? I said, I ain't never seen it. I said, yeah. She said, God is going to do it if you keep him first. And you need to go on the prayer line. I was like, what? So I went up there and the pastor said almost the same thing. If you keep God first, you keep going, he's going to honor your business. I boom, got back in the business. I took $1,000 income tax return. $1,000. All I had to go through my ex-wife then because she didn't believe in what I was doing. Another long story, like I said. Took $1,000 and the guy came to me. He said, Reggie, do you have business cards? I was like, no. He said, do you have a website? I said, no. He said, how do you expect to compete on this level? You don't even have those things. So I boom, took the $1,000, got a website built. My company was called Godly Image because God showed me. I skipped this part when I was 19 years old, laying on the bunk. I had opened the Bible to Genesis 1:26, 1:27. That God created man and woman in his image. So
Mhm.
I'm reading that in prison, and it jumped out to me. I know each one of you have your own scripture because I had went through a lot back in the days. Dark skin went in. I was called African booty scratcher, frying pan, everything you could think of. We went in. Now me and more chestnut, we winning. You know what I mean? But back then in high
Right.
school, it was the light skinned people. We went in. So, but when I read that, all the insecurity, when I said, if I'm created in God, what do I possess? It began to dawn on me. So I got Godly Image tattooed on my chest, and my company, everything is Godly Image because that's how God spoke to me. So I created this company. I'm selling t-shirts. Now it's gone from just selling t-shirts to I'm starting my own fashion line.
Mhm.
Sweatsuits, hats. I started doing fashion. I said I want to be the first faith-based Tommy Hilfiger polo, all that in face. I'm doing good. And I started getting these messages from people in faith that I honor, like, you need to write a book. But in my mind, I was like, I want to write no book. Wait till I'm in Paris and all these big stores, because I'm doing fashion shows, I'm getting bigger, and I can make more money. I was thinking about the money I could sell my book. And God kept saying, I need to sell a book. So I ran from God for 2 years. I didn't want to write that book. So I met Aeneas Williams. He's an ex-football player in St. Louis. He has his own church. I'm there. He was out of town. I was the guest speaker. It was like 200 plus men. I'm a speaker. After I got through speaking, it was like 7 men in a row saying, out of each one, like, where's your book? Where's your book? Which this is my first book, Live Determined. Don't let your struggles bully your dreams. Because at that time, I was like, all right, God, I hear what you're saying. I read that book. That book got me on CBN 700 Club. I thought it was just my story. I kept sending it in. The producers came to the house to do a story on me. And I was like, how did y'all? Man, it took me a while to get in. He said, yeah, somebody sent you your book. I'm like, what? He said, because we were going to give you a 5-minute live interview into the studio. But when we saw your story, we said, we got to do a documentary on you. I was like, who said? The book opened the door. Then I went on TBN, Juice TV, where Willie Moore Jr. interviewed me through him and about the book. So obedience, y'all, you never know what God is telling you. But I wrote that book. So from there, I started being an author and a speaker. And I didn't know how to be a speaker. All I knew was God would say, tell my testimony. And this guy used to open Christian comedy. And he knew my story. He was like, man, hey, just tell him, I'm gonna give you like 3 minutes to tell your story a little bit. I would open up. So it was like inspiration and comedy. Now, when people would come in the door, because my design, like, this is my Entrepreneur for God, my new brand. But anyway, people would come in and see my shirts. They would buy a couple. But when I got through speaking, I would have 2 lines of people. People was buying me. Almost one time. People will buy hope. People was invested in me. I was like, wow. So all I do was telling my story. Then I had to learn how to tell bullet points, how to, become a message.
Right.
But for a while, I was just telling my testimony. Went from there, I started traveling. I traveled all over. I'm getting interviews on, like I said, BT. I'm getting interviews everywhere because the American dream. I got on the front of the St. Louis American. Was me and my ex-wife. And it was like Reginald Foreman found God, found godly image. It was people recognizing me in the mall for getting on the front of the paper. Things was happening. And so that's how I started working and doing my business and everything. So the last part of my business of what I do a lot of things. So right now I'm working on a toy line called Reggie the Lion. Reggie Lion is a faith-based.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a faith-based Mickey Mouse. This is him. This is the book.
Wow.
Yeah,
Awesome.
he's gonna be the next Mickey Mouse. Bugs Bunny is huge, but that's why I say purpose turns to pain. I don't know how much time. It's not a lot of going to that, but that idea came after me and my wife at the time were trying to have children. She was having a problem. We had twins. We lost one of our children. My daughter died. To the point where it was so angry, she was mad at God. And I had to tell her, like I said, I'm skipping parts for time. We were traveling around. I was doing my events, 21 Days of Greatness, that I'm doing right now. I'm back at it. I'm so excited about it. That's why I'm happy. But we're doing 21 Days of Greatness
Awesome.
live. And then my wife had a miscarriage. I came up the stairs, heard her screaming, stand on part of water. She was like, I was like super faithful. There's no way. I done did all this for God. I done been through all this pain. I'm around here traveling, changing people. Why would you take my daughter? So she was like, no. And then maybe I peed on myself because she had fibroids in her growth. So I go back downstairs for an hour. I heard a worse scream. I come back upstairs. She's sitting on the edge of the steps, and she said, look, 2 feet was hanging out from down there, 2 little feet coming out. I was like, oh my God. Went there, the doctor said, you lost your daughter. So then my son came out at 27 weeks earlier. He was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. You talking about somebody that's been trusting God and still going. This is why I'm serving God at the height of my time. I lose my daughter, and then my baby boy get diagnosed with cerebral palsy. So he's in the NICU. I'm sitting there back at I had to stay strong because I had to tell her, we still got a baby in there, even though the twin fell out, because they were twins. First time pregnant, we get the best of both worlds and we lose. So he's in the NICU, she's there, and I said, all right, they settle. I said, God, how does this make sense? Why does this a part of your will that I would lose my child? And at the time, the cerebral palsy wasn't real to me. I didn't even think about that. So I'm just talking about losing a little girl. And as I'm sitting there in prayer, I remember what God showed me in prison that I have a purpose for. So I'm trying to stay strong. Right before my eyes flashed was MADD, M-A-D-D, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. How the woman lost her daughter to a drunk driver at 13, and she turned into an organization. And that's how Reggie the Lion was birthed. I seen me taking all positive affirmations. He speaks positive. You're smart, you're strong, God loves you. And God just showed me traveling
Wow.
all over the world with Reggie Lyon. That's where we are right now. We just got a contract with BTVB, BEE like B. She owns a television network down here right before in Georgia and Alabama. I moved back down. She has 600,000 homes she goes into. So we're moving on that right now.
Wow, awesome, awesome, awesome. I don't know about y'all, but man, of you, for those of you who are listening, like he has said a few times, obedience, obedience, obedience is everything. Reginald, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you again for your transparency and taking us through that journey. I know there is still so much more to your story, but for those of you who want to know more, who want to check out his coaching, who want to check out his speaking, who want to check out his books and even his fashion line, Reginald, tell us, where can people connect with you?
My website is reginaldforeman.com. It's my name, Reginald Foreman, God made, Reginald Foreman, God made. Instagram is Reginald_Foreman. But like I said, my website is reginaldforeman.com.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much again for being with us today, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that, you know how I always say, I hope your spirits have been stirred. I hope that if nothing else, that you have gained some level of hope and knowing, like, look at all that Reginald has been through and all that he has done and lost across over the years, and yet look at how God is still using him. And that's why this platform is so important for men to share their stories, so that you know you're not alone in what you're going through. God has not forgotten you. God sees, he hears, and he knows all. But if you would just be obedient to whatever he is calling you to, know that his greater, what he has for you is greater than you can ever imagine in your old lifestyle. So again, thank y'all for tuning in. Be safe, stay safe. Remember to be a blessing to someone else. Love y'all and take care.